In 1976, the death of a 23-year-old German woman shocked an entire nation and sparked a debate that continues to this day. Some people believed she was suffering from a severe mental illness. Others were convinced that she was possessed by demonic forces. Her name was Anneliese Michel, and nearly 50 years later, her story remains one of the most controversial and disturbing cases ever associated with exorcism. What makes this case so fascinating is that it sits at the crossroads of faith, psychology, medicine, and fear. The deeper you go into the story, the harder it becomes to determine where reality ends and belief begins. Anneliese Michel was born on September 21, 1952, in West Germany. She grew up in a deeply religious Catholic family where faith played a central role in everyday life. Her parents believed strongly in prayer, repentance, and religious discipline. Friends, teachers, and neighbors described Anneliese as a kind, intelligent, and respectful young woman. She performed well in school and dreamed of becoming a teacher one day. By all accounts, she appeared to be living a normal life, and nobody could have predicted the tragic path that lay ahead. Everything began to change during her teenage years. In 1968, when Anneliese was 16 years old, she experienced what appeared to be her first serious medical episode. She suddenly felt unable to control her body. She later described a sensation of overwhelming heaviness, as if an invisible force was pressing down on her. Medical examinations followed, and doctors eventually diagnosed her with temporal lobe epilepsy, a neurological condition that can cause seizures and unusual sensory experiences. She was prescribed medication, and for a time, it seemed that treatment might help. However, the situation gradually became more complicated. According to Anneliese and her family, she began experiencing strange symptoms that went beyond ordinary seizures. She reported hearing voices that nobody else could hear. Sometimes these voices mocked her. Sometimes they frightened her. At other times, she claimed they spoke directly to her. She also reported seeing dark figures and disturbing images that left her terrified. As the months passed, these experiences became more frequent and more intense. Doctors believed that her symptoms could be explained through a combination of neurological and psychiatric conditions. Hallucinations, unusual perceptions, and emotional disturbances are not unheard of in severe medical cases. But Anneliese's family viewed the situation differently. Because of their strong religious beliefs, they began to wonder if something more sinister was happening. They noticed changes in her behavior that seemed difficult for them to understand. The young woman who had once embraced her faith now reportedly felt extreme discomfort in certain religious settings. According to some accounts, she became distressed around sacred objects and places of worship. As years passed, Anneliese's condition continued to deteriorate. She underwent numerous medical treatments and consulted multiple doctors. Despite these efforts, her symptoms persisted. She became increasingly isolated from friends and ordinary life. Her dreams of a normal future slowly faded as her daily existence became dominated by fear, confusion, and suffering. Her family watched helplessly as the daughter they loved appeared to slip further away from them. Eventually, her parents turned to the Catholic Church for help. At first, church officials were cautious. The Catholic Church does not automatically assume that unusual behavior is evidence of possession. In most cases, medical explanations are explored first. For a long time, requests for an official exorcism were denied. But after years of appeals and continued reports about Anneliese's condition, church authorities eventually agreed to authorize a special religious intervention. In 1975, 2 priests were assigned to work with Anneliese. What followed would later become one of the most famous exorcism cases in modern history. Over many months, religious rituals were performed regularly. During these sessions, participants reported witnessing dramatic changes in Anneliese's behavior. According to those present, her voice sometimes sounded different, her mannerisms changed, and her reactions became increasingly intense. Audio recordings were made during some of these sessions, and those recordings would later play a major role in shaping public perception of the case. The recordings remain controversial even today. Supporters of the possession theory point to the disturbing sounds and conversations captured during the sessions as evidence of something supernatural. Skeptics argue that the recordings reflect the behavior of a severely ill individual undergoing intense psychological distress. Regardless of interpretation, the tapes contributed significantly to the mystery surrounding the case. As the exorcism sessions continued, Anneliese's physical condition worsened. She became weaker and weaker. Her health declined dramatically. Family members and those involved in the rituals believed they were helping her fight an invisible spiritual battle. However, from a medical perspective, many experts would later argue that she required extensive healthcare and monitoring. The conflict between these two perspectives would eventually become the central issue in the tragedy. By the summer of 1976, Anneliese was in extremely poor health. Years of illness and suffering had taken a devastating toll on her body. On July 1, 1976, she was found dead at the age of 23. Her death immediately raised difficult questions. How had a young woman reached such a critical state? Could her death have been prevented? Who, if anyone, was responsible? The aftermath of her death transformed the case from a private tragedy into an international controversy. Authorities launched an investigation. Medical experts reviewed her history. Journalists descended on the story. Public interest exploded. Soon, the case was making headlines across Germany and beyond. The legal proceedings that followed focused on the actions of those closest to Anneliese, including her parents and the priests involved in the exorcism. Prosecutors argued that more could have been done to ensure proper medical care. The defense maintained that everyone involved had acted out of sincere concern and a genuine desire to help her. The courtroom became a battleground between different interpretations of the same events. Medical experts testified about epilepsy, psychiatric disorders, and the possible causes of Anneliese's experiences. Religious perspectives were also discussed. The court examined evidence, witness testimony, and the now famous recordings. In the end, the case highlighted a difficult question that still resonates today. How should society respond when deeply held religious beliefs intersect with serious medical conditions? The court eventually reached a verdict, but the decision did not end the debate. In many ways, it intensified it. Some people viewed the case as a tragic example of untreated mental illness. Others continued to believe that Anneliese had experienced something beyond the reach of modern science. The disagreement has never truly disappeared. Over the decades, books, documentaries, articles, and films have explored the case from every possible angle. One of the reasons the story continues to captivate audiences is because it refuses to fit neatly into a single explanation. It challenges assumptions about faith, medicine, and the limits of human understanding. Every piece of evidence seems to generate new questions rather than definitive answers. Today, most medical professionals view Anneliese Michel's case through the lens of neurological and psychological illness. They point to her diagnosis, her symptoms, and the scientific understanding of similar conditions. At the same time, some religious believers continue to see the case as evidence that there are aspects of human experience that science cannot fully explain. The divide between these viewpoints remains as strong as ever. Perhaps the most important thing to remember is that behind all the controversy was a real person. Anneliese Michel was not merely a headline or a mystery. She was a daughter, a student, and a young woman with hopes for the future. Her life was marked by years of suffering, confusion, and struggle. Whether one views her story through a medical lens, a spiritual lens, or a combination of both, the human tragedy at its center cannot be ignored. And that is why the story of Anneliese Michel continues to endure. It is not simply a tale of exorcism or possession. It is a story about belief, fear, illness, and the search for answers in situations where certainty seems impossible. Nearly half a century later, the same question still echoes through documentaries, books, and discussions around the world: what really happened to Anneliese Michel? The truth may never be fully known, and perhaps that uncertainty is what makes this story so haunting.